So again, we're discussing the second part of Yoshua, the first part of the Sefer, with the 7 years of Kibush, the 7 years of conquest. And the second part of the Sefer is the Chalukah, the division of Eretz Yisrael among the conquered territories. According to Chazal, the conquest took 7 years, and the Chalukah of the land actually took 7 years. Remember, however, again, we've said it a number of times, and the Psukim say it a number of times, that the conquest was actually not completed, meaning to say, they conquered most of the land. Some of the land they did not conquer. They then divided all of the land, even the parts of the land that were not conquered. So some people, some Shvatim got Chalokim of Eretz Yisrael that were not even conquered yet, so they literally didn't have any place to go home to. And as well, the Malbim is Mechadesh, although there's no Makar in Chazal directly, that there were certain Shtachim that were not assigned to any given Shevet, and that allowed for potentially expansion. The Shevet was given permission on its own to wage war, to conquer that territory and use it for increased populations and the like. That's a shtickle chiddush. But the one thing that is not a chiddush is a very interesting thing. Apparently, once land was allocated to a shevet, it became that shevet's responsibility to conquer it, meaning you no longer had the benefit of a national army. So when the land is going to be divided among the Shvatim, and let's say, for example, Shevet Ephraim, that's one of the examples mentioned, is given territory, their allocated territory for which they have not yet completely conquered it, they're on their own, meaning the national army only conquered the land before it was divided amongst the tribes. Once land was divided amongst the tribes, it became the individual tribal responsibility to conquer that land, and they could not necessarily call upon the national army to work with them, although they could make private agreements with tribes. Sometimes you'll find one tribe helped another tribe and the like. So it's a little peculiar, meaning it wasn't always the situation that Klal Yisrael conquered Eretz Yisrael. Sometimes a given Shevet had the job of conquering its own individual territory. So that's a shtickle chiddush. So in a sense, for reasons that are not entirely clear, the land that was conquered before the Chalukah was primarily the land that went to Yehuda. So it's interesting, therefore, Yehuda essentially got its territory by virtual national conquest, as opposed to many other tribes that got their land only by their tribal conquest because they had their portion and then they had to fight on their own. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now again, forgive me for repeating, but these are complex systems, so you need to reiterate them a lot. Remember the big machlokas, Rashi and the Ramban, about how the land was divided among the tribes. So remember, of course, that 2.5 tribes, their territory was Bichlal, not even part of Yoshua's Asek. This was the land of Sichon, Melech HaEmori, and Og, Melech HaBashan, east of the Jordan. It's called Aver Hayardain, and that was conquered under Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership in the desert, and that was the land that was given to Ruvain and to Gad, and Chatzi, doesn't mean half, but part of the tribe of Menashe. They were Aver Yardain. But remember too, just to review this, that Moshe Rabbeinu made them swear that they would not return, they would not settle. They would leave their wives, their children, and their sheep, Aver Yardain, but they would not settle there until the Jewish people completed their conquest. And therefore, Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe are fighting with the rest of the Jewish people in the years of Kibush. One question I honestly did not see an answer for, and I don't really understand. The very end of Sefer Yoshua, there's kind of a moving ceremony where Yehoshua discharges Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe, and he gives them permission to return to their home by basically telling them, you've done your job, or you've kept your promise to Moshe Rabbeinu. Baruch Hashem, you're able to return home. The question is that this happens after the 7 years of Chalukah. Why in other words, I understand that for the first 7 years they had to be there because they were conquering the land. But why do they have to stick around for the next 7 years? If the next 7 years are described as years of Chalukah, then why would that create any obligation on Ruvain, Gad, and Chatzi Sheva? In other words, they were gone for 14 years? Now, maybe they had, what do they call it? Leaves, right? When soldiers go home, and maybe, we don't know that they didn't go home at all for Shabbos or whatever it would be. I don't know the military plans of Yeshua's army. But in terms of settlement, they were conscripted, apparently for 14 years. Why is that so? I mean, they should have been sent home after 7 years. But it could be, I'm just thinking out loud, that maybe what happened was during the 7 years of division, that also included the conquest of the individual tribes. I mean, the land was divided, individual tribes were conquering their Chalakim, and maybe Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe were like augmenting forces that could join. So essentially, it's a little misleading when you say 7 years of conquest, 7 years of division. It could be that even in the 7 years of division, there were continuing conquests of individual tribes, and Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe were osek in that as a supplementary service. Again, that's a chiddush. I did not see any explanation of that, but otherwise, I think it's a pella. Why were they there? Why were they even there for the next 7 years? Okay, but be it as it may, Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe, they have their chelek Ever Liyarden. There is a whole big discussion in halacha. What is the halachic status of Ever Liyarden? Are you chayev in trumos and masros? Does the laws of Shemitah apply? Because on one hand, it was settled by two and a half tribes, and it was under Moshe Rabbeinu. On the other hand, it's not within the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. So how does that apply for mitzvot, teluyot b'aretz? Okay, that's a whole discussion. But be it as it may, their chalukah is not relevant here because that was taken care of Moshe Rabbeinu. So now we have the rest of Klal Yisrael. So the rest of Klal Yisrael, we exclude Shevet Levi, because Shevet Levi does not get a portion in the land. So essentially, therefore, Reuven, Gad, Chatzi Shevet Menashe are Ever Liyarden. Shevet Levi, which will be discussed, will be getting 48 cities dispersed throughout the tribes. But they don't have their own chelek b'aretz. And indeed, there'll be an enumeration of Orei Leviim in every tribe of Am Yisrael. 48 is divisible by 12. There will be Orei Leviim, including Ever Liyarden. Now, let's just ponder that for a moment. Shevet Levi did not have an identifiable chelek in Eretz Yisrael other than their arim. And around the arim, there was a migrash. Migrash is like a parkland or pasture. Right? So you had a city surrounded by pasture land and the like. Now, what is the reason why Shevet Levi did not get a chelek in Eretz Yisrael other than the Orei Leviim? So there are really two different reasons to consider, and both reasons are right. Reason number one is that they shouldn't be distracted. Kohanim and Leviim, their job is to be osek in Ruchnius, both in terms of the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, or the Avodah in Mishkan. The Mishkan is in Gilgal. It'll be moved to Shiloh. But be it as it may, Gilgal, Shiloh. That's one idea, and therefore we don't want them to get involved in land ownership and politics and running a city-state, or running a kind of a state, a tribal grouping. Now here, the Meshech Chochmah makes a very important point. If you were a Kohen or you were a Levi, on the average, how much time did you spend working in the Beis HaMikdash or working in the Mishkan? How often? Now, obviously, it depends on the population you have, but what eventually happened was, you'll remember, let's take Kohanim first. Kohanim are divided into 24 mishmaros, 24 watches. Family-based, meaning all the Kohanim are divided into 24 family groups. A mishmar does avoda in the Beis Hamikdash 1 week at a time. A mishmar starts Shabbos afternoon, right? The old mishmar does the tamid of the morning, but in the afternoon the new mishmar works from Shabbos afternoon through next Shabbos morning. And the mishmar in turn is divided into batei avos, smaller families, which took charge of day by day, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So there are 24 mishmaras kahuna. So what that means basically is, putting aside Yomim Tovim, which I'll talk about in a moment, the cycle is gone through approximately twice, meaning you have 1 through 24 for 24 weeks, and then you start again, 1 to 24. Right? So it's only 1 mishmar per week. Now eventually, 1 mishmar could be thousands of Kohanim. So, if you're a Kohen, okay, let me just mention one thing. Now, Yomim Tovim is a little different. On the Shalosh Regalim, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, all of the Mishmaros showed up. And they would have to draw lotteries as to who got to do the Avodah. Okay, so there were 3 times a year in which a huge number of Kohanim were there. All the Mishmaros showed up. But if it was not a Yom Tov, it was only 1 Mishmar did the Avodah for the entire week. Now, the same way there were 24 Mishmarais of Kahuna, there was also 24 Mishmarais of Leviim, meaning a given Levi family was attached to a given Kohen family, and this would be their week, right? And the Leviim were musicians, the Leviim were singers, the Leviim were actually administrators. They were in charge of the maintenance of the Beis HaMikdash and the like. Now, there was a permanent staff, meaning to say there were some Leviim who literally were permanent. But in terms of the bulk of them, they too were based on a Mishmar system. So 24 Mishmaras of Kahuna, together with 24 Mishmarais of Leviah. And the actual names of the Mishmaros are given in Divrei Hayamim, the book of Chronicles, which actually goes through the particular families. Extremely complicated, by the way, to try to make a list of the 24. The 24 Mishmaros of Kahuna are very straightforward, actually. The Kahuna is straightforward. The Levium is kind of a mess because there are so many different lists of Levium and Divrei Hayamim that there's a big machlokas among the Meforshim, which are the Mishmaros and which are some other family groupings or the like. But again, it's not nogeya to us. So, any given Mishmar may have thousands of Kohanim. And the Avodah was allocated based on lotteries, drawing lots. So, if you were a Kohen, you might actually go through a whole year and not do anything at all. First of all, you're only in the Beis HaMikdash 2 weeks a year, and the Shalosh Regalim. And you're part of maybe thousands of Kohanim, and if you didn't make the lottery, then you didn't get anything. Now, granted, in Yeshua's time, the populations were much smaller, because how many Kohanim were there? We actually don't know. Maybe there weren't that many. So maybe you were on duty more often. But the Meshech Chochmah makes the point that you see how important Avodas Hashem is. That you need to prepare an entire year just so you can do one thing, maybe one thing a year, if that, in proper kavanah. The Torah says we don't want the Kohen or the Levi to own land, so they should be able to dedicate themselves to Avodas Hashem. But what do you mean? Avodas Hashem? I mean, he'll be on stage for half an hour in the whole year. The answer is, it takes a whole year to prepare yourself for the half an hour. That's the Meshech Chochmah Sa'orah. But even without the Meshech Chochmah, I think we could answer that the idea is that the Kohen and the Levi, their spiritual mission was not limited to what they did in the Mishkan. They were also teachers of Torah, etc., learners of Torah. So essentially they needed to be panoi to focus on their spiritual mission, and they were supported by the trumos, by the masros, by the korbanos that they ate, etc. Okay, so that's reason number one why the Leviim, Kohanim and Leviim, were not given a chelek in Eretz Yisrael, in order to free them up to be able to focus on their learning, on their avodah in the Mishkan, etc. Reason number two is we want the positive influence of the Leviim to be dispersed throughout all levels of the nation. Meaning, if Shevet Levi would have gotten a chelek ba'aretz, so there would have been a portion of Eretz Yisrael where all the Leviim are, that would mean in the other tribes there would be no Leviim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted there to be a system where the beneficial power of the Torah and the mitzvahs and the Kedusha of Shevet Levi would spread throughout all levels of Am Yisrael. And therefore, through the system of the 48 cities of Leviim, every single tribe of Klal Yisrael had some cities of Leviim. On the average, 4 cities, right? If you divide 48 by, it's not exactly right, but it's almost right. We'll look at the calculation later. But basically, every tribe had, with only one or two exceptions, had 4 Levite cities in their boundaries. The only way that's thrown off is Yehuda had 5 Levite cities and Naphtali had 3. That's the only exception, and why that's so is also a bit of a mystery. But other than the 5 and the 3, every other tribe had 4. Now that's an important point. The point is you want the kayach of Torah not to be limited to a certain geographical area. You want the influence to be spread throughout Klal Yisrael. So these are 2 different reasons why the Arei Leviim, why Leviim were not given a chelek b'aretz. One is to prevent them from being distracted from their function, and the other is that their influence should spread and permeate throughout all of Klal Yisrael and not be limited. Now, it's interesting to go back a little bit. If you go back to Yaakov Avinu's blessing or curse, remember we read 2 weeks ago about the story of Shechem, where Shechem raped Dinah forcibly, and Shimon and Levi tricked Shechem. The people of Shechem is both a city and they tricked the people of Shechem to circumcise, and when they were weak on the 3rd day of their circumcision, Shimon and Levi wiped them out, killed them, because they said, you cannot make our sister a harlot, a prostitute, or whatever. And without being marich in that particular story, Yaakov Avinu was very upset. But as the Rambam points out, Yaakov was not upset over what they did. He was upset that it was not the right thing to do because it would endanger us among the local population. And the Rambam actually says there was a halachic justification. The Rambam writes, Shimon and Levi were not stam murderers. Shimon and Levi had a halachic justification for what they did. Because Dinah's kidnap and rape on the part of the Shechem, the individual, was a violation of the Noachide laws, which prohibit both the theft and arayos, kidnapping is theft, and violation of the Noachide laws creates a chiyuv misa on the part of the person. But then the Rambam says the 7th Noachide law is the commandment to set up a court system to punish the other 6 violations. And since Shechem, the city, did not set up a court system to adjudicate Shechem, the person, the Rambam says they were chayav misa for being mevatel dinim, and therefore Shimon and Levi justifiably had the right to kill them. Yaakov was angry because you shouldn't have done it because that endangers us. We're a small group of people. We're in a big hostile population. Right? This is the famous Shita of the Rambam that actually provides a halachic justification for Shimon and Levi. It is a very, if you think about how to apply the Rambam today, it's a real problem. Because essentially what the Rambam is saying is, if a non-Jewish society does not punish violations of the Noahide law, not only can I be a vigilante and kill the guy who violated the Noahide law, I could kill the community that didn't adjudicate violations of the Noahide law. Wow. I mean, think of what that would mean. So, again, don't record this, whatever. Again, I'm not saying this halacha l'maisa, absolutely not. But, I mean, this would mean, if you have, let's say, terrorists, and the Palestinian Authority, Hamas certainly, is not going to adjudicate those terrorists, then even the so-called innocent civilians, are chayav misa, because they're not Mekayim, the Noachide law of Dinim. Okay, so the truth of the matter is, the Rambam Shita, thank you for the glass. The Rambam Shita is very dangerous, to say the least. It's a bit revolutionary if you try to apply it, but nevertheless, this is the Rambam's famous Shita about Shimon and Levi. So now, let's go back. Yeah.
Does Rambam also poskin in a clear way that this is halacha l'maisa, that this principle can be applied?
He does not say it. He does not say halacha l'maisa, but he doesn't say it's not halacha l'maisa. I mean, you have to assume if he says it, it's meant to be a halacha, but he doesn't say beferish that it would apply today. Yeah.
Even in that case where you would be allowed to kill the people who are not fulfilling a no obligation, you would still need a bait in to poskin that those innocent people are failing to fulfill the obligation, right?
Well, you might assume that, but let me ask you this. What base did Shimon and Levi themselves have? I mean, you're back to the same problem.
Right.
That's why I call it a vigilante thing. As if, I can make that decision, right? Okay, it's a big problem. Okay. But again, this is very, very fascinating. It's actually very, very relevant to contemporary situations. But that's not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on the blessing that Yaakov Avinu gave on his deathbed. Right? Yaakov Avinu blessed, or not, each of the tribes, each of his sons. And the truth of the matter is, the first three didn't really get much of a blessing. I mean, Reuven, he called Reuven unstable like water. He called Reuven that you're not going to be the firstborn, etc. And that's primarily because of Reuven's sin. After Rachel died, and Yaakov put his primary residence with Rachel's maidservant Bilhah, so Reuven moved the bed into his mother's tent. Now the Torah describes it as much worse. The Torah actually says Reuven slept with Bilhah. I mean, that's what it says. But Chazal say it doesn't mean he did that, but it means he interfered with Yaakov's relationship with Bilhah. So Reuven kind of gets a little bit of a knock. Then Shimon and Levi are combined together. So there's no real bracha till Yehuda. Shimon and Levi says, I curse their anger because they destroyed a city and etc. And then he says the following about Shimon and Levi. Al chalkem b'Yaakov, I will scatter them, I will divide them among Yaakov, among the nation of Yaakov. He uses both of his names. Afitzeim, I will scatter them, Yisrael. So Yaakov's curse, or maybe blessing, we'll see, was that Shimon and Levi will be dispersed and not concentrated, because their concentration is too dangerous. It's like nuclear energy. Now, how was this fulfilled in the days of Yoshua? It was fulfilled in two different ways. Vis-a-vis Shevet Levi, this was fulfilled by 48 Levite cities which includes Kohanim, by the way. When I say Anorei Levia, some of the cities were Kohanim cities, others were Levium cities. So Achalkem Yaakov by Shevet Levi was fulfilled by dispersing them throughout Eretz Yisrael. How was it fulfilled with respect to Shevet Shimon? So here we read in Sefer Yoshua that Shimon was very, very different than any other tribe. Shimon did not have its own territory. Shimon was assigned a number of cities within the territory of Yehuda. Okay, so there was no part of Eretz Yisrael that was chelek of Shimon. Shimon had many cities indeed, that were muvla, not throughout Eretz Yisrael, but that were muvla within the Nachala of Shevet Yehuda. So you would be in Shevet Yehuda, and at some point you'd come to a city, and I don't know if there was a sign or whatever it is, this is Shimon territory. So Rav Hirsch points out that this is why Yaakov uses two different terms, right? He repeats the idea of dispersal twice, because there are two different reasons why you might divide something. You might divide something because you want to spread its influence, and you might divide something because you want to weaken its influence. And he says, this was the nafkamina between Shimon and Levi. Because if you think about this, both Shimon and Levi acted out of zealousness, to stand up for what's right, to stand up for the kavod of Hashem and the kavod of their mishpacha, who are the nation of Hashem. And they did what they did, and there was halachic justification for what they did. And this represents kanot. Zealousness can be a very, very good thing. But if you then look at the direction in which each of them went, you see opposites. The kanos of Shevet Levi eventually got directed into Kedusha of the highest order. They were the ones who punished the sin of the golden calf. And they were the ones that were given the zechus, together with Kohanim, of Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. And they're the ones that became the holiest of the tribes. Shimon, on the other hand, the kanos turned into a bad thing. It became Zimri, right? Zimri in the Midbar, fornicated with the Midianite woman, Cosby, etc. So Rav Hirsch points out, kanais can become good, or kanais can become actually an evil, egotistic selfishness. So he wants to suggest that with Shimon, it morphed into something negative, and they needed to be dispersed to weaken their influence. With Levi, it became something positive. They needed to be dispersed to increase their influence, to expose more and more people to it. Okay, so that's why Shimon is kind of contained within Yehuda, as opposed to Levi that is spread throughout the land, right? So the truth of the matter is, this was already foretold in Yaakov Avinu's bracha, well before Yoshua, that Levi and Shimon are going to be split, albeit in different ways, right? Levi, 48 cities in every tribe. Shimon, the cities are muvla b'toich Yehuda. Yeah.
How did this work with the Goral when they were at 12 and 12?
Yeah, we're going to look at that. Apparently, how does the Goral work, right? You can't have something called cities within Yehuda. I mean, and then what if another tribe gets it, right? Now, of course, Hashem worked everything out, but still, how can you have a Goral when you have a particular matchup? We'll try to talk about that. Now, one thing that one might ask a following question, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but okay. Years later, after Shlomo HaMelech, so you'll recall that the Jewish nation split into two kingdoms. There was the southern kingdom, which had Malchei Beis David, Rechavam, and all of the righteous Jewish kings. And that was focused mainly around Yerushalayim and south, and that was called Malchus Yehuda. Malchus Yehuda. And then there was the northern kingdom of the 10 tribes, which included Ever Yarden, which was called Malchus Yisrael, Yeravam ben Nevad, etc. And that is in the book of Malachim, right? One of the difficulties is there's a constant zigzag between describing the Malcha Yehuda and the Malcha Yisrael. Now, here's the question. The southern kingdom, it is said, comprised Yehuda and Binyamin. It's called Malchus Yehuda, but Yehuda and Binyamin. The northern kingdom had everything else. Now, the question would be, given the fact that Shimon is one of the 10 tribes, and Shimon was located in the land of Yehuda, what exactly happened when the kingdom of the north was proclaimed? I mean, Shimon is now in enemy territory. Right? And how do you reconcile Shimon as being one of the 10 tribes when Shimon's cities are located in the land of Yehuda? So there are a few different approaches to this. Approach number one is that Shimon vacated its cities. That it's indeed quite possible that essentially when a northern kingdom was proclaimed, which was a rebellion against Rechavam, Malchus based of it, Shimon evacuated its cities, went up north, and those cities were taken over by Yehuda. Right? So possibility number one is Shimon didn't live there anymore. That's one possibility. Possibility number two, which is kind of unusual, but we know it in our own society, is it became like West Berlin, meaning to say, if you remember, before you were born already, but when there used to be an East Germany and a West Germany, and Berlin was situated. I don't want to. I have to look at a map again, but I think it technically was in East Germany, but West Berlin was an enclave. In other words, it was an enclave of West Germany that was Muvla in East Germany. So, and you have that, right? So, as a result, or Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, right? Guantanamo Bay is in Cuba, but it belongs to the United States. So possibly you had a Berlin type of situation where the cities of Shimon were enemy territory. They probably had walls and fortifications, but they were there, right? They were in the in the Malchus Yehuda. So that's possibility number two. So possibility number one is they vacated. Possibility number two is they created a Berlin Wall type of situation. Possibility number three is that maybe Shimon was not part of the 10 tribes, meaning to say, when we say the southern kingdom was Yehuda and Binyamin, maybe when we say Yehuda, we're including Shimon, because Shimon was in the territory of Yehuda. And Shimon is not one of the 10 tribes. And so how do you get 10 tribes? Because you're counting Shevet Levi, because here's the thing. Most of the Levium were located in the north, because most of the tribes were north of Yerushalayim. So as a result, most of the Levium were part of the northern kingdom. So maybe when you talk about the 10 tribes, maybe you're actually counting Shevet Levi as one of the 10 tribes, and you're counting Shevet Shimon as Nichlal in Yehuda. Right? So these are three possible answers. And by the way, the fact that most of the Levite cities were located in the northern kingdom may give rise to a question. I think it's come up in Q&A, and I don't know if I said it at the time, but it's a very, very simple answer. And that is, people ask, why are there so few Levium? Why are there more Kohanim than Levium? It really makes no sense, because Kohanim come from a small group within Shevet Levi, Aaron, etc. There ought to be many more Levium than Kohanim, right? So what is the dearth of Levium in Klal Yisrael? The short answer is because most of the Levium were destroyed as part of the lost 10 tribes. The Kohanim, on the other hand, in fact, you'll see this in Yoshua, the cities of Kohanim were located in proximity to the Beis HaMikdash, which was to the south. So as a result, the argument would be that after the Chorban Beis HaMikdash, there were more Kohanim than Leviim. Because Leviim were Nichlal in the 10 tribes that were the lost 10 tribes. That I think is actually a pretty good answer to that question, and that may also explain how you get 10 tribes without Shimon. Shimon belongs to the south, but we allocate Levi to the north, even though there were some Kohanim, most Kohanim and some Leviim were in the south, but most were in the northern kingdom, and that explains why there was a sharp reduction in their numbers. Okay, alrighty.
Thank you for listening to this Awesome Ech production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.